follow on me. We're marching out into the night. Follow on me. We're standing up against a giant. Follow on me. We might be walking in the fire, but if it's where we're meant to be, then on me.
And I do show that it is 15:13 military time, and the significance of that is John 15:13 says, greater love has no one than this, than to lay down their life for their friends. And for those of you who are newer, this is the first time on, or maybe listening later, my son Mark Lee was the first Navy SEAL that was killed in Iraq, August 2nd, 2006. And that's what he did. He laid down his life for his friends to save his teammates. And I'm so proud of that young man. And we have so many of our other men and women who sacrificed their lives for us and for the freedoms that we enjoy each and every day. And I didn't have any choice the news that was given to me on August 2nd, but I did have a choice how I responded. I could have curled up in a ball, felt sorry for myself. It's the toughest pain I've ever known, and I understand when people do that, but that wouldn't have brought Mark back. For me, that's not my personality. That's not how God wired me. So to be able to be out there supporting those of you who served and paid the price for our freedoms, to be able to support the families, to be able to support other Gold Star families, it's my honor to be able to do that. And that's a great day when we can do that. And we're very excited to have with us John Troxell today. I had no idea that there was even the position. He is called SEAC, which is the Senior, let's see if I get this right, Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
Although I have that R after it now as being retired.
Oh, that's right, because you retired recently. I mean, you were on some terminal leave, but officially as of March 31st, it says in your bio. So we're excited to have you here today. This has just been a crazy idea that God put on my heart and on Ryan's heart to be able to do this. We put this together in 9 days, and we have had such an amazing lineup of guests that have come on, and we're excited to have you here today. All of our guests have volunteered their time, and I know that for most of you, that's something that when you go out and you speak, that's something that you get paid for as well. So thank you for your generosity to do that. We're very grateful for your time today.
Oh, I'm excited to be here, Debbie. First and foremost, God bless you, and for the, the sacrifices that you made, as your son was killed in action, but just the impact you've made, with America's Mighty Warriors and the On Me 20. And it is just truly an honor for me to be here today and be part of such an august group that you have arrayed for this motivational series. So, I feel like I'm on the varsity now as I look at all the other guests that you've had on here. So a little nervous, but ready to get after it.
Well, I thank you very much. After our guests hear the bio that I've read, if they haven't already read, we send it out as well when they get the hour notifying them it's coming up in an hour. But as I read through it, I was just so moved by all your many years of service. So I would just like to read that official bio so our guests can hear as well the service that you've given to this country. John Wayne Troxell is a retired United States Army senior non-commissioned officer who served as the 3rd Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. In this capacity, he served as the Principal Advisor to the Chairman and the Secretary of Defense on all matters related to the troops of the United States Armed Forces. This position made Troxell the most senior enlisted member of the United States Armed Forces. Talk about varsity team. He enlisted in September 1982 and served over 37 years in numerous units throughout his career. Troxell was sworn in as the SEAC on December 11th, 2015, and finished his tour of duty on December 13th, 2019. His official retirement date was March 31st, 2020. Troxell's 5 combat tours of duty included Panama, Operation Desert Shield Storm, 2 tours in Iraq, Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. As the SEAC, Troxell routinely visited troops deployed to countries around the world to include Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, Yemen, Libya, and numerous others to gain the pulse of the force for the chairman and the secretary. His lengthy list of military education and numerous awards and decorations can be read on his bio that we included on the reminder for this webinar. Troxell is married to the former Sandra Jimenez, his wife of over 36 years from El Paso, Texas. They have 3 adult sons and 4 grandchildren. Since his military retirement, Troxell has opened his own consulting firm, PME Hard Consulting LLC, and now serves as a brand ambassador for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Hiring Our Heroes Foundation, the Veterans Lending Group, and Eyewear Safety Systems. He serves as the vice president for the strategic planning for DFND USA. He also serves as a military consultant for Alpha Warrior 360 Gyms and Film 45 movie production company. Troxell is the advisory board lead director for FitOps by Performex and serves on the advisory boards for Allied Forces Foundation and the Patriot Foundation. His focus continues to be on assisting military members, veterans, and their families. SEAC retired Troxell and his wife Sandra reside in Lakewood, Washington. Thank you so much. And as I said, the awards that you had, the different training that you've been through in the military. I mean, we could have spent the rest of the time just reading that. And I know as we spoke the other day, and our hearts are so similar with some of our passions for our military and for our Gold Star families. But before we jump into it, tell me a little bit, where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in the great state of Iowa, Davenport, Iowa. I was born in Springfield, Illinois. Shortly after, when I was a toddler, we moved to Davenport, Iowa. And I grew up there, graduated from West High School in Davenport. And a lot of the folks, the guys that I looked up to in our neighborhood were going off and joining the military and coming back and, with this sinewy, muscular look and just this air of confidence about them. And I was hooked, and I said, hey, I want some of that, and I had friends that joined the Army, joined the Marine Corps, and joined the Navy as well. And I said, I want some of that. So I graduated from high school in 1982 and shortly thereafter joined the military and served for 37 years, 10 months, 29 days. I wasn't counting, but my wife, Sandra, I
was waiting for the seconds.
And I just truly enjoyed. I think when I joined the military, it was my calling because it was something that I just easily adapted to. I met my wife shortly after at my first duty station in Fort Bliss, Texas, and we've been married, as the bio says, over 36 years. And she's been all over the world with me. We've had 2 tours in Germany, a tour in Korea, and then while I was the SEAC, she went on USO tours with me. Herself, she's been to Iraq twice, Afghanistan twice. She's been to Poland. She's been to Turkey, and she's also landed on USS Abraham Lincoln, an aircraft carrier. So
nice.
She's got an extensive military resume herself, even though she was my spouse.
And I think that's, something a lot of people, especially in the civilian world, don't realize how much those families serve as well. So we don't say thank you just to you. We say thank you to your wife and to your children who, allowed you to do what you do, supported you back home so you could focus on all those deployments while you were gone, and they keep the home front running while you are deployed. And so, I think that's so crucial and so important what our families give as well. So we don't ever want to forget to thank those families for the sacrifices that they make as well. So I noticed you have grandkids. Go ahead if you wanted to comment there.
Yeah, I just, it really hit, I didn't really fully appreciate military spouses. And by the way, the 8th of May is Military Spouse Appreciation Day. So let's make sure we all recognize military spouses on that day. But it really hit me when, I was a Stryker Brigade Sergeant Major in Iraq in 2007. And I was Surge Brigade number 4 into Iraq when President Bush put 5 more Army Brigade combat teams there to try and put more pressure on the enemy and also assist the Iraqi security forces and Iraqi government stabilizing and becoming more viable. And, we went right into, my brigade went right into Baghdad and the northern Baghdad belt. And we ran into a hornet's nest there. And Unfortunately, we suffered some heavy casualties right when we got into and started combat operations. And so I was calling back home and talking to my wife, and then I called home to let her know that we had an incident where we lost another soldier, and she had to break the bad news to me that my next door neighbor, who was a fellow sergeant major in special operations, had been killed in action the day before. And the way she told me about it is what really kind of told me what spouses go through. Her routine back then, like every other military spouse, is do something to keep your mind off of what your loved one is doing in combat or forward deployed or whatever. So we, our kids were, teenagers at the time. So they were doing what teenagers do, but she really liked to sit on the front porch and enjoy a book. And she just happened to be sitting on the front porch. And, what every military family hates, and obviously you've been through this, Debbie, is when those two sedans pull up and the uniformed people get out, and there's the chaplain, the casualty notification officers. And on this day, they happened to pull up in front of our house when Sandra was on the front porch. And so automatically, that told her, hey, something bad has happened. And, fortunately for us, but unfortunately for our neighbor's family, it was our next door neighbor who was killed in action. And her having to assist with the family and go through hearing, she was a witness to the spouse being notified that her husband was killed in action. And it really hit me then that, we do our combat operations, and when something bad happens and the enemy gets a vote and someone is killed, we honor the warrior and everything. But when that warrior leaves theater, it's the families back home that have to deal with, the after, as we continue with combat operations. And so I really gained an appreciation there. And then it caused me to reflect to, my first combat tour during a peacetime military in 1989 as a member of the 82nd Airborne Division. And we were alerted, marshaled, and we ended up parachuting into Panama City on the 20th of December, 1989, to oust Manuel Noriega, stabilize the Panamanian country. And, at that time, the day before, it was half-day schedule was beginning for Christmas. And I told my wife as I kissed her goodbye that morning, I said, hey, when I get home, we can go Christmas shopping for the boys. Well, that never happened. And at that point in time, there was no cell phones. There was no way to communicate. And when a unit is alerted like that, the phone lines are cut so that there's no outside communication for security reasons, all the right reasons. And she didn't find out that I was not coming home and that I had actually parachuted into combat until she saw it later that evening on the news, And so I just now, I really am focused on assisting our veteran community, but more importantly, the families, and especially people like you, Gold Star families, because your pain will never go away, and I want to make sure that we don't forget the sacrifices that families make when men and women are killed in action. So sorry it took so long, but I'm so passionate about looking out for the military families as well. And that's why I'm doing what I do today.
Yeah. And God bless you. As you said, that was, for me, the toughest day of my life. And being in the military community, when they show up at your house,
yes,
if you were wounded, if something had happened, they'd be reaching out to you by phone, trying to get you, to where your loved one is. And, that's one of those memories that for me will forever be ingrained, in my mind. And I don't know that that's not a memory you want to have, but I don't know
right.
that that's ever a memory that I want to let go of, because I want to remember that pain. So as I reach out to other families, that I know exactly what they're going through. And I remember it was probably my first trip to Iraq. I'm the first Gold Star mom in history to be in the combat zone where their loved one, their child was killed. And I think it was shortly after I came back from that, and I had been praying since Mark died. Before he died, I prayed every day for his safety and for those that were serving. But after he died, I didn't want it to be just Mark. I wanted to remember everyone that gave their life. I wanted to know where they lived, how old they were, who their family was. And so, as difficult as it was, I signed up to get the DoD casualty reports. And this was 2007, so we still had quite a few that were coming through. And every time one of those came through, literally, it was like, piercing my heart with that pain. But I didn't want it to be just about me. I wanted to know every other family. I wanted to be able to support them with that depth of intensity of that pain. And from that pain is where my passion came, to be able to continue to reach out to those families, to be able to listen to them, and to know every time they get notified exactly what they're going through and what lays ahead for them. And I love that your heart is there as well for those families. And I can't imagine for your wife, as she sat on that porch that day and had them pull up, in front of her house, that I'm sure her heart sunk about it was something that happened to you. And yet, as we spoke about this the other day, and you said, even though once she realized it wasn't her, the pain was still there. That was your next door neighbors, and I'm sure you guys were such a blessing to his wife, as she went through the grieving process. And you're exactly right. You don't ever get over it. I just kind of wonder when people say, so, like when I went to Iraq, so did that help you get closure? Did you get over it when you went over? I'm like, okay, well, I didn't go over there for closure. I went over there to love on our troops and support and encourage them at Christmas on behalf of all the other wives and mothers and family members who couldn't get over there and love on them, to be able to bring a little piece of America over to them. But that it never goes away. You don't ever get over it. You learn ways to cope. You learn ways to manage the grief. You can prepare for those difficult days of grief, and make sure you're not just, sitting at home looking at pictures all day long or watching videos of them. You learn those things. And so I wanted to be able to do that for Gold Star families as well, to be able to encourage those and those things. Tell them, and it works for, what we're going through with the coronavirus, to adapt and overcome.
Absolutely.
Wake up every morning and be grateful for one thing. Make sure you're exercising. And in the beginning of grief, I didn't feel like I wanted to even get out of bed, let alone go for a walk. But it was like, okay, get up and just walk around the block. It's a little block, just walk around the block, and then you get those feel-good endorphins that are released. I tried to make sure I was eating healthy. I didn't go to drugs or alcohol, to help numb the pain. And I get that, it's an intense pain. But, you have to make those healthy choices as you go through grief to heal. But God bless you for your heart and your passion for there. Because that is a burden of combat that does need to be, carried. And I'm a contributing author in several different books. And when I autographed the books, I signed "Live Your Life Worthy of Their Sacrifice." Actually, the shirt I've got on today, the back of it, that's what it says. And we owe that to those, who gave their lives. We owe that to every one of you who served. Even, if you came back home, not physically injured, but maybe with mental, or, you came home and you're good, or you gave your life over there. We do have an obligation to our military and to their families to live our lives worthy of that sacrifice. What would you say were probably some of the most difficult things that you, or one most difficult thing in your 37 years of combat? I'm sure there were numerous times of personal struggle that you went through.
Well, I think the toughest part is as a leader in the military. In my last 20 years, serving as a command sergeant major, a senior enlisted leader from the battalion level all the way to the SEAC, was, every loss of life is a certain circumstance that has to stand on its own. And the person that made the ultimate sacrifice, you have to honor that person and celebrate their life. And I'm like you, the term "lest we forget" will always be something that stays foremost in my mind, because we cannot forget
Yes.
that combat is brutal and unforgiving, and that it is something that the enemy gets a vote at. And unfortunately, when you look at the world we live in today, where we are constantly in long-term power competition with near-peer kind of nations, but also the threat of terrorism is still alive, even though coronavirus has affected a lot of our adversaries. That threat is still out there. And we have to understand that in order to protect our nation and that of our allies and partners, and to make sure that we are looking out for the safety and security of our citizens, that the men and women that are serving today are going to continue to have to deploy. And they're going to have to do things to have an effect on an adversary that will not allow them to be a threat to the homeland. And unfortunately, when it comes to dealing with terrorists, our forces are going to have to do things to eliminate those kind of threats, and that's going to continue to put them in harm's way. So the hardest thing for me is just like you, when I read that casualty report and there's another young man or a young woman that made the ultimate sacrifice. You mentioned PTSD and TBI. Another thing that really I'm passionate about now is the number of veteran suicides that happen, and the suicide rate in general in our nation, and along with our active duty force. But when I look at veterans, I really am passionate about making sure we're looking out for them. When someone serves in the military, they are part of a high performing team, regardless of what they are doing and what service they're in. And they're around men and women that have like values, that are as passionate about accomplishing the mission as they are. And they know that they can count on their buddies on their left and right. And they certainly want to be that person that their buddies know that they can rely on them. And when it comes to major combat operations, one of the things that, especially when it comes to PTSD and how that may lead to suicidal ideations, whenever we deploy to a major combat theater, and what I'm talking about, back when your son deployed, in the mid 2000s, when there were still struggles with developing the Iraqi government and the Iraqi military, there was about 20,000 terrorists in the Iraqi country. The IED threats were very high and everything. And, when someone deploys to a dangerous area like that, and they know they're going to deploy to that, and they're a member of this warrior class, mentally, emotionally, and physically, they are preparing themselves for that deployment. They want to make sure they're at the cutting edge of whatever it is, whether it's marksmanship, it's their battle drills, it's first aid, or whatever it is. They are making sure that they are at the cutting edge. But they also understand that as I mentioned before, the enemy will get a vote. And in some cases, we prepare ourselves mentally and emotionally that we may not be coming back home, that we have to deploy, and we have to protect our nation and our freedom and our way of life. And hey, when we go out of the wire today, that may be the last time we ever go out and everything. And fortunately, the vast majority of service members who do this crossover mentally and emotionally, that death is right at the doorstep. Don't get me wrong, physically, all of us want to come back home. There is not one person in the world that does not want to come back home to their family. But we mentally and emotionally prepare ourselves for it. And psychologically, we prepare ourselves for it. And the vast majority of us do come home. And the challenge is going from a mental and emotional mindset of where death is at your door every day, and that you have to be at your peak performance to make sure that you and your teammates get through this firefight or get through whatever this adverse action that's going on. And then you come back home where we are surrounded by life and death is not at the doorstep. And now crossing back over to understanding that, hey, I've got the rest of my life in front of me now. And in some cases where men and women get out of the military and they're no longer a part of these high performing teams in terms of, being in the military and life or death and having cutting edge technology and weapon systems and everything. And they are looking for that same adrenaline. They're looking for that same sense of direction, purpose, identity that they had in the military. And in some cases, you know, again, the wounds of war, as you mentioned, aren't just physical, it's the mental and emotional wounds. And unfortunately for all of us that have served in combat, those demons in our head are always there and they're lurking around. And the idea is we have to be able to handle those demons internally, much like we handled the demons that we handled on the battlefield. And so I'm very passionate now about making sure that we are bringing awareness to PTSD and traumatic brain injury, because they are realities of conflict. And we got to stop looking at this as a stigma. You know, there cannot be a stigma associated with this. PTSD, when someone has those kind of things and they're doing things like you and I talked about the other day, where you go into a restaurant and you make sure that you have eyes on all of the high-speed avenues of approach, or when someone walks up behind you abruptly and the hair goes up on the back of your neck and you turn around abruptly because, you know, you feel like you're vulnerable and everything. These are normal reactions to the abnormal circumstances that men and women have served in combat. And until we look at things like that, and until we get after the stigma that is associated with having PTSD or something like that, we are going to continue to have these problems where the PTSD, TBI, the lack of identity, the lack of being part of a high-performing team kind of spirals into, you know, some kind of drug or alcohol abuse, and pretty soon it gets associated with a firearm. And, you know, we have this veteran suicide rate that historically is about 22 a day. You know, the VA now says it's about 20 a day, but it's something that I'm very passionate about, because going to combat, serving, seeing brutal and unforgiving stuff, suffering through that kind of stuff, suffering the loss of your friends is just, it is normal. It may be abnormal circumstances, but it's normal reactions to that. And until we get a whole grasp on that, we're still going to have challenges. And just in the last week alone, 2 young men that I knew very well, one a former Stryker Brigade soldier who I had the honor of meeting at an Allied Forces Foundation event in Washington, D.C., succumbed to the demons, and another, a great devil dog Marine that you know, was doing a lot of things with Operation Proper Exit and other veteran support organizations, both succumbed to those demons. And it's just a shame, because both young men with bright futures ahead of them. So I think we can never, as much as we continue to support our military families, as much as we continue to, you know, take care of our Gold Star families, this veteran suicide rate that we have and the PTSD and TPI is something that we got to continue to put focus on, because we're going to continue to deploy. We're going to continue to have to do things to defend our freedom and our way of life. And unfortunately, men and women, especially young men and women, are going to be exposed to all of the traumas of combat. And when they come back home, we're going to have to make sure that we have the tools in place that they can deal with it and continue to have a successful life.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, one of our main programs is our Helping Heroes Heal program, because we're just as passionate as you are about our veterans struggling with PTS and TBI. And I think you had mentioned earlier that when you went over there, you prepared to be best marksman, to be whatever. You trained, you practiced, you prepared, you were ready, as you said, to die if that was required of you. But
absolutely,
I don't think we're doing a good job of bringing that preparation into when the transition out of the military for our veterans. They, you know, if they don't have a new mission, if they don't have a new purpose, that's when that downward spiral starts. And as you said, they start self-medicating because they don't know how to deal with these things that they've seen. And it's just, it breaks my heart. I feel like as a nation, we equipped you, we sent you over there, we paid you, we gave you your mission. And then when we bring you home, it's just like they're forgotten about, or they're sent to the VA. And it's like, okay, and the VA's attitude, I know there's good ones out there, but so many of them, that we've had our veterans we've worked with. They're given prescription drugs. We've got one of our guys was given 43 prescription drugs to take all at the same time. How can that be good for anybody? 2/3 of those medications had a side effect that say may cause suicidal tendency. Why would anybody give people that are depressed, discouraged, those types of medications? And so we have researched for over 8 years. That's when we started our program, paying for the hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And then we, a couple of years later, add the hormone and vitamin therapy, natural things that are restoring your body back. And it's not just an emotional issue that our men and women struggling with PTS and TBI are dealing with. It is a physical as well. And I think so many of, I'm surrounded by a lot of the spec ops guys, and those guys, they're the tip of the spear. They're the ones that can always be the overcomers and get through. And when they're struggling with this, because they think it's just something emotional they should be able to fix. And we do the spec scans of these guys' brains before and after, and ladies, we've had ladies go through as well. But to see the damage in the frontal lobe of the brain, it is just shocking. One of our veterans, who's an older Navy SEAL who just went through, literally looked like an RPG went through his brain. He had a hole in his brain. How he was functioning at all is beyond me. But then to see afterwards that same brain scan and the healing that's taken place and the lives that are changed, and they still have to deal with that emotional, they still have to go through dealing with that, but then your body's at a healthy place to be able to process through that normally. When you don't have that healing that takes place, in the brain, then they're not equipped to do that at all. That frontal lobe controls the emotions. And so there's oftentimes just weeping and crying at things that they wouldn't normally. And so then they're like, what is wrong with me? And then I think they have no hope. Like I said, when they go to the VA and they're just given these drugs and they're like, well, this is what I'm going to have to be like for the rest of my life. And I don't want to live like that. And so, then they end up, and it doesn't have to be that way. So please help us get the word out. Any of you that are listening, for our program, we've probably got about 45 veterans right now going through, and the cost of that is between $10,000 and $13,000 for each one. So, but a worthy cost to pay. And actually, that cost would be a lot less than, if they had to live on these prescription drugs the rest of their life. It would cost us as a nation so much more. We've actually introduced legislation. It's the PTS and TBI Treatment Act in November. And once we all get back, where we can be in DC again, it was introduced on the Senate and the House side. And if we can get that passed, then the VA will have to pay for the hyperbaric for our veterans with PTS and TBI. And that is our main focus this year. We canceled one of our retreats to take those funds to be able to work there because we're so passionate about that. My husband committed suicide 25 years ago, so we've had to live through that as well. And I think that's why, for me, that passion is there as well. God doesn't waste the pain when you go through tragedies and trials and loss. And if we choose, He can use us then with that knowledge to help others and comfort others in the way that we've been comforted. So it's my honor to be able to do that. But you are spot on about that being, a huge issue that needs to be at the forefront of what we're doing for our veterans.
Yeah, and I think God bless. I'll give you an example of, one that I was. So when I was a Stryker Brigade Sergeant Major, Surge Brigade number 4, as I mentioned, we ended up losing 54 soldiers that year, and we had over 500 severely wounded. So I was about 9 or 10 months into the deployment when I took my R&R, my 2 weeks. But I also wanted to visit our wounded at Walter Reed and at Brooke Army Medical. And so my wife and I took 3 days during that time frame, and I went to Walter Reed. And here was one of my young soldiers here that was on a roof of a building in Diyala province, northeastern Diyala province in Mahmoudiya, and was shot by a sniper. Immediately lost consciousness, woke up in Landstuhl briefly as he was about to go into surgery, went into surgery, he ends up in Walter Reed. And now he's around a bunch of strangers he doesn't know, and he's around a bunch of medical professionals who are world-class medical professionals who live by, providing comfort and aid and healing and everything. And here's a warrior that, just few days before that was on the battlefield doing his warrior tasks and battle drills. And now he has all of these people around him that are giving him sympathy and compassion and everything. And he's looking for that purpose and direction, you know. Again, these aren't bad people. They're doing what they're expected to be doing. But I think when it comes to the wounds of war, especially the invisible wounds, men and women aren't looking for that sympathy. They're looking for understanding, and they're looking for avenues to be able to deal with what's going on inside of them. So I think there's got to be some compassion in dealing with these wounds, these invisible wounds of war, but there's got to be a certain discipline to it as well. And as you mentioned, they're looking for purpose. All of us are that are looking for purpose, motivation, and direction on how to deal with things. And it shouldn't be, you know, through some kind of pain management with prescription drugs. It should be exercise. It should be proper eating. It should be talking with somebody that will, you know, not only educate them, but help them, and not someone that, you know, will, you know, just overwhelm them with sympathy and be over compassionate. Because in my experience, that turns a lot of people that are members of this warrior class off, because we're not looking to be babied or for sympathy. We're looking for understanding and how to deal with what's going on inside. And in some cases, when they don't get that, and as you mentioned, there's they've kind of lost hope, because now they're drowning in this sea of drugs and everything. And you know, and then they go even further south and do something that they can't recover from, like take their own life. So I absolutely agree with you. And you know, and having that great support system around as well. And what I mean by that is, and I'll tell you my own story, you know, I've always, for 20 years as a sergeant major, you know, was, you know, kind of labeled an angry guy, you know, like most senior enlisted are, whether it's a sergeant major, you know, or a master chief or a chief master sergeant or whatever, you know. But, you know, I found myself being angry even at home, and in some cases looking for reasons to get angry. And with the schedule I had as the SEAC, you know, for 4 years, you know, traveling 275 days a year to visit the troops, whether it's sailors on ships or airmen at remote bases overseas, or soldiers and Marines in direct combat, or even Coast Guardsmen that were out on the littorals doing things. I was busy all the time. And as my time started getting down and I was about nearing retirement, you know, my wife finally came to me and said, "Hey, look, you know, you need to do something, because I don't know that we can live like this when all of this is gone." And meaning that I'm angry all the time and everything. And that was an alarm to me. And I said, this is a woman that has stood by my side for 36 years. This is a woman that has done things alongside me, like drive along Route Irish in Baghdad in a Rhino bus, or, you know, land on an aircraft carrier, or fly in a helicopter in the Hindu Kush mountains of Afghanistan. And so I went and saw help. And for the last year that I served in the military, I was once a week seeing a therapist to assist with my PTSD. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I was still that, you know, sergeant major, or that SEAC that was about standards and discipline, but I understood more, because the therapist I had was not there to coddle me. She really, it was almost as after, you know, I went, the first meeting I went to, really it was to, you know, satisfy my wife, saying, "Hey, I need to go do something." I wasn't all in on this is going to happen. And then when I got in there at that first meeting, and my therapist, it felt like she was just ripping my head open, and she could tell what was going on in my mind. And she was just basically reading me like a book. And I was like, wow. And I was hooked after that. And now it's to the point where it's something I look forward to, you know. And again, it's not about, you know, getting sympathy. It's about understanding, and it's about how do I become better in dealing with this. And I think there's a lot of veterans that are in the same boat as me, but I will tell you, there's a lot of active duty members that are dealing with the same issues. And my message to them and to their families is, it's okay to go get help. And, you know, I know there's a stigma out there And, and there was a stigma being the SEAC. I wasn't comfortable going in and telling the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the senior military officer, that I'm seeking counseling. I wasn't comfortable telling the Secretary of Defense that, hey, your senior enlisted guy is going to seek counseling. It was uncomfortable, but it's something that was necessary. If I'm expecting every other man or woman that's serving in uniform that may have challenges and they may need assistance, if I'm not leading by example, then I need to get out of the way.
Yeah, and we said that on several of our other calls, that is not a sign of weakness, that is a sign of leadership to be able to do that. And you're so spot on about the sympathy thing as well. And, when I'm speaking with our veterans who are struggling, I'll talk about battle. When you were over in Iraq, did you one day say, hey, I don't think I'm going to wear my body armor today. I don't need it. I don't know if I'm going to take my weapon. Or you went out fully kitted up, ready to go, ready for whatever possibility. You had all your armor on, you had your ammo, you had your gear, you were prepared. You came back home, it's just a different kind of battle now that you're in. And you still need to put your armor on. It's a different kind of battle. You're not taking a weapon with you. You're not firing bullets at anybody, but it's still a battle, and there's still different kind of armor that you have to put on to be prepared for that. And, I think that's, part of the Mama Lee, it's, I'll love you. I'll hear what you're saying, but don't expect to come in here and just pour your heart out and not me, give you the kick in the butt that you need to say, go get this done. You were equipped in the military to fight battles. You still got that same fight. You just need to use it a little different way. And, I know you and I could go on for hours and hours and hours because we're both so passionate about this. But we, have tried to limit this and keep it to about an hour. And one of the things that each one of our guests, we've had them do is throw out a challenge. So what challenge do you have for our listeners today?
So, I've kind of adjusted this a little bit, Debbie, since our conversation the other day. One of the things, we're going through this COVID-19 crisis, and much like any enemy we faced, I think we got to lose fear of this virus. We have to retain respect for how dangerous and deadly this virus is, but I think we have to lose fear, and we cannot allow anyone around us to incite fear, incite panic. And so we have to do this head on. And so my message to everyone out there is, how do I deal with this crisis? How am my family and I dealing with this? Well, we're making sure that we're as healthy as we can be. We're working on our immune system to make sure we're healthy. So I'm exercising all the time. We're eating right. We're living life and everything. Even though we're not on a lockdown. I hate that term lockdown because 38 years in the military, I know what a lockdown is, and generally it's because
it's not good.
A night vision or a weapon or something. Stay at home order. You can still go out. I go out. I went on a 7-mile run earlier today outside. So do what we can. But my message to people is, what are you prepared to do for you, your family, and our nation during crisis? And then the question after that is, and then what are you prepared to do? So this is something, I used to ask my troops all the time. When when you're confronted with a threat, what are you prepared to do? And they'll talk about their battle drills, deploy and report, take cover, return fire, whatever it is. And then my message after that, what are you prepared to do after that? Meaning we have to continue to educate others on how to react to bad situations. We also still have to continue to get after eliminating threats and things like that. So my challenge to everyone out there is, whether it's the current crisis we're in or whatever crisis comes up in your life, ask yourself 2 questions. What are you prepared to do? And then what are you prepared to do? Okay, because we also have to have a contingency if that number 1 doesn't come up. The other challenge I have is to continue to be selfless in how we move forward. The one thing I hate is when I see what's happened with this coronavirus, and it is a pandemic, and there's been, panic buying and everything. And my wife and I have done our normal weekly shopping out there. Now, I mean, it was tough for a while because we couldn't find toilet paper, but we knew things were going to be okay. We said, hey, we'll get through this and everything, and so I think my challenge to folks is, what can you do for others? And when it comes to a crisis, the planning, the preparation, whatever you've done, what are you prepared to do? And then what are you prepared to do? That's my challenge to people out there.
So good. It's interesting that you said fear, because this was in my little devotional, Jesus Today, that I read. It said, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. Though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. And that's from Psalms 46, 1-3. So I think you're spot on with the fear. The fear doesn't, we don't focus on those things you can't control. That's part of that fear. Those are the what ifs, what ifs. Focus your time on those things that you can. But I'm sure we've got probably lots of questions. You got time to stick around and do a little Q&A?
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Yeah, I'm in.
We've got Ryan that jumps on board. Hey, Ryan. Looks like you got a little sun out there, buddy.
I did. I've been trying to get this place ready, like I've been sharing with you. So lots of work outside today.
That's awesome.
But hey, John Troxell, thank you, sir, for your service.
Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
But I'm gonna say this: your authenticity, your vulnerability today, and the position that you've held and where you've gone with On Me 20, I know has changed somebody's life today. I know there's somebody watching that needed to hear that. And that's what this place has done for the last, what are we, 14 days, Debbie?
14, yes.
That's what we've done here. And that's what our guests like yourself, the selfless servants that have come here and offer their time have brought to this webinar series. I don't know, we call it a podcast, Debbie, whatever it is. So I just want to thank you for that, because there's somebody today that needed to hear that. And from a person of your stature, a person of your field experience, and that vulnerability goes a long way. So I thank you for that. I encourage you to keep that door open, because there will be lives that are changed in the future because of the heart that you're serving with. I also want to share too that you hit on two of my main positions with athletes right now. I'm a former professional athlete, and marriages and transition are two of my, and unfortunately in my world of sports, we're transitioning into suicides as well too, which is not favorable, but it's real. So I just want to thank you for bringing those topics up today. We've had some great guests that have talked about transition, but you actually being authentic with that challenge of marriage is so true. And I come from a similar place. So again, there was somebody out there today in our group that needed to hear that their marriage can be healed, that their marriage can, be salvaged, and that they're not alone in if it is rocky right now. I've met so many military men and women that are part of that divorce rate, and it's extremely high. And I'm engaged in trying to reduce it for athletes and military, and I'm just thankful to be a part of this program. So let's go ahead and get rocking with these questions, because I could talk to you all day long too, because I love your heart. I love your heart, brother. Thanks for sharing your time in counseling. I work with so many veterans with anger issues. As we work through this more often than not, we arrive at a pool of unresolved grief. What are your thoughts?
I absolutely agree. And I excuse my language, when somebody is pissed off all the time, there's underlying things for that. Debbie, you talked about the worst day of your life when, your son was killed in action. The worst day of my military life was the 19th of July, 2007, when my patrol was attacked with an Iranian weapon system, an explosive form penetrator, and in an ambush that killed one of my personal security details and severely wounded our fire support officer. And I knew this young man's family, Corporal Brandon Michael Craig. As a matter of fact, my wife and I are still great friends with his parents, Danny and Mary Jane Craig, and his sister, even his grandma and grandpa. We know them all very well. We knew them all at the time. And when we got hit that day and we had to put Brandon in a body bag, I had to go back. All of us had to go back in that patrol. And we went back to our hooches. And I knew that at a certain point, I knew already what his family didn't know, which is that their son was killed in action. And I knew that this was going to be powerful grief for them because they were so proud of this kid. He had already won 2 Valorous Awards in the first 3 months of combat. He was one of these kids that the military was made for him. And I couldn't say anything. I wasn't the casualty notification officer. I could not reach out to his family. So I had to wait through that. So I think grief comes from losing someone close to you. And then the 54 trips to the morgue that my commander and I had to make during that deployment, the constant trips when I was on R&R to the hospitals to see these men in wheelchairs or severely burned or with crutches or anything. I think that grief builds up. And then when you see things like, a suicide bomb go off in Paris or in Brussels, and these are the same kind of people that you've been fighting year after year after year, I think this grief just continues to build, and it builds into anger, and it builds into hate, and it builds into things that you wish you could do. And then when you're not in the military anymore and you have this underlying grief that is turned into anger, what are your outlets to it? As we've talked, Debbie, it's tough if you don't have that, structure around you, or if you don't have ways to get those outlets out, it continues to get internalized. So I think that question is absolutely spot on. And I would even say this, it's grief and it's fear. And in a lot of cases, for me, it was fear of not being ready. So when, someone would come up and I wasn't, out in a public setting, and someone just came up and said something to me and it scared me, I would get mad because that person scared me. That person wasn't going out of their way to try and do anything bad to me, but I think they caught me off guard. And when it comes to being in combat, especially in places like Afghanistan, where the insider threat was something that it still is out there now, being unprepared for someone that has served is something that you take as a personal defeat. So I think it's grief, and I think it's fear that leads to this anger. And unless we're taught or shown coping skills, as the term you use, Debbie, on how to deal with this, then we're going to continue to have problems. And in the end, the family is the ones that are going to end up suffering. So I think I absolutely agree with that question, that anger is based on underlying grief, and I would throw in fear as well.
That's awesome.
Ryan, let me interject real quick in here as well. One of the things we've talked about families, how important that is in the transition, and as our veterans deal with the PTS and TBI, and that's a big factor of it as well. So if you're a spouse, please go to our website under our Helping Heroes. We've got numerous videos on there to help, the spouses cope. One of the resources, if you come into our program, is a book called Love Our Vets that deals, it's a wife who wrote it, whose husband has PTS, and here's things to do, not to do, to say, not to say, and this is why your loved one is reacting this way. And don't take it personally. You just happen to be the closest one to them, and you get a lot of this. And so it's crucial that balance is in there to work with the families through this as well.
That's good, Debbie. How about an example or two of what insights you were able to bring to the Joint Chiefs on behalf of the enlisted?
So, one thing, for the last 10 years of my career, I served in joint assignments. Actually, it was the last 9 years. So in 2011 and 12, I was the command senior enlisted leader of the International Security Assistance Force Joint Command, which was the operational headquarters in Afghanistan that was responsible for all of the regional commands and day-to-day combat operations. So I got to see not only our U.S. soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines in combat, but the other 49 nations that served as well. And then coming back from that, I went to Korea, and now here I was assigned to the United Nations Command, Combined Forces Command, and U.S. Forces Korea as the command senior enlisted leader. And I spent the majority of my time with the ROK military, the Republic of Korea military, and the United Nations sending states, as well as all of the services, the 7th Air Force, 8th Army, Naval Forces Korea, and Marine Forces Korea. And so when I came into the position as the SEAC, I already had a pretty good understanding of how all the other services. Don't get me wrong, I was a soldier. I wore the Army uniform, and I was proud to be a soldier. But I had this experience with all the other services that I felt comfortable going on a Navy ship and into the chief's mess, or I felt comfortable PTing with a bunch of Marines, or going to an airfield and talking to 500 airmen or whatever it was. And then because I was a career enlisted service member that had served at the tactical, operational, strategic level, I had not forgotten what it meant to be a senior enlisted leader. And it's all about the people of the organization. And as the SEAC, your organization is the Department of Defense, the United States military, that includes 3 million active Guard and Reserve men and women. And so my job was to get the pulse, as Secretary Mattis used to say the 2 years we were together, hey, you give me the pulse of what's going on out there. And so if there was something going on and there was an incident that happened in Somalia, or if a decision needed to be made about rules of engagement or something like that, I could be the eyes and ears for the chairman and the Secretary of Defense and go to those places. Because when General Dunford or Secretary Mattis or Secretary Esper or General Milley now, whenever they go somewhere, I think we all know they've got an entourage with them, and that whatever nation they go into, there's going to be people know when they're coming and everything. When it was John Wayne Troxell, the SEAC, I could go in however I wanted to, and nobody was going to be waiting for me. I mean, there would be somebody from the unit to pick me up, but it was just me and my battle buddy, my operations NCO or my public affairs NCO, and that was it. And I could get in and get unfiltered what was going on at the ground level and report that back. Wasn't meant to circumvent any kind of chain of command or any leadership, but I was I could be the eyes and ears for the chairman and the Secretary of Defense and give them the pulse of the force that wouldn't come up through different layers of command to get up to them. And so that's what I think I did. And because it was tough for the chairman and the SecDef to go to places like Syria, to go to places like Yemen, Somalia, to Taiwan, or any of these other places, I could get in there and I understood what their vision and their priorities were and what we were trying to do with our national military and national defense strategy. And I could get in and be that unfiltered 10,000-mile telescope that they needed to get real-time information. And I think that's what I did best. And the other thing I think was the ability to bring all of the services together as a team. I consider myself as the guy that had to make soldiers okay hanging around Marines, and sailors hanging around airmen, and coasties hanging around all of them, and so I thought one of my missions was to be a team builder with the service senior enlisted, the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, the Sergeant Major of the Army and Marine Corps, Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard, and all of the combatant command senior enlisted leaders, bringing them together. Now, in some cases, it was like playing referee, but in the end, I think we were more of a cohesive team. And plus, with my position as the SEAC, some of those guys would never get an audience with the chairman of the Secretary of Defense if there wasn't someone there looking out for that. So that was kind of the two ways that I kind of got after business when I was there. But it was all generally focused around what were we doing to protect our nation, our freedom, and our way of life.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Trying to bring them all together. My oldest served in the Marines. My son-in-law was in the Army. Mark was in the Navy. Mark's best buddy, who kind of was like a third son to me, was in the Coast Guard. And my brother served in the Air Force. So I can do the hoo-yah, hoorah, hoo-ah. And the Air Force didn't have one. I made it up. It's jacuzzi.
Now, I did at one time. I memorized every service's song. And I think after a few adult beverages, I could still do them all. But it's fading since I've been out of the position for the last 6 months.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for your time here. This has just been amazing. And as Ryan said, your vulnerability and has impacted so many lives together. And one of the things we want to do for you is, how can we support you? Are there certain things you're doing that we can support you? I don't know, obviously you just got out, so you don't have any books or anything that we can support. Is there anything else we can do to support you, your family? Is there one of those foundations that we can support?
Well, so everything that I do now, I am a member of 3 foundations. One, I'm the lead director of FitOps by Performix, which is an organization that takes transitioning service members, trains them to be personal trainers, and hopefully gets them employment either owning a gym or as a personal trainer. Allied Forces Foundation is I'm an advisory board member there, and it's a foundation that takes care of wounded, ill, and injured, not only from the United States military, but from our partner nations like the UK, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and other nations out there that we've served together in combat. And then being on the Patriot Foundation board, another foundation that looks to provide scholarships to service members so that they can continue to reach their educational goals. All of these foundations, and then the veteran support organizations that I work for, like Hiring Our Heroes, Veterans Lending Group, and then military support organizations like Eyewear Safety Systems, and even the Alpha Warrior and even Film 45, the movie company that I work for. All of them are about telling the story of the men and women that have served, are serving, and their families. And so we cannot take our eye off of what sacrifices the men and women of the United States military continue to make. And even though it may not be front page news right now with what's going on in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, on the Korean Peninsula, or anywhere else in the world, I can tell you that there's 196 nations in the world, and we've got troops in over 160 of them. And that's about 300,000 troops that are still doing things like fighting an insidious enemy, providing security force assistance, or that is assisting other nations with their security. And we are the global nation that the world looks to when they want to partner with somebody. And so we cannot let a day go by that we don't say and continue to support the United States military, our veterans, their families, and our Gold Star population like you, Debbie, that have paid the sacrifice with their son, daughter, husband, wife, or whoever it is. And so for everybody out there, in your prayers, continue to keep the United States military and their families, past and present and future, in your prayers as we continue to move forward, because the security situation is going to continue to be contentious, and we're going to need men and women that are not afraid to say, send me and I will make things right for my nation, our freedom, our way of life, and for the future of our nation. So that's what I would say. Just continue to keep them in our thoughts and prayers.
Yes, thank you. I couldn't say it any better. That is so perfect and so crucial, so important. John, again, thank you for being here. We so appreciated your time. I look forward to see, what we're going to do together in the future as well for our veterans and for those who are serving. So yes.
I look forward to it. Thank you very much, Davey. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you.
I just think of Mark's amazing last letter home, and how he ends that. And he says, to my family and friends, do me a favor. Pass on the kindness, the love, the precious gift of human life. And that's what this series is. Back to You, and Mark's memory is our gift back to you during this time of confusion, of loss, of uncertainty, that this is our gift back to you in Mark's memory. And for those, I know we talked about some heavy stuff today. And so for those of you that are struggling with PTS and TBI and maybe suicidal tendencies, please, this is our charge to you, that you would step up and say, on me. It's probably Mark's final words to his teammates. And he was saying, I got the lead on this. You guys follow me. And just as John stood up and said, on me, I got issues I need to take care of, I pray that you would stand up and say, on me, let us help you. We're here to help you. You don't have to go through this alone. This is not a sign of weakness, so please reach out. Thank you again for all of you who are here supporting us. I know there's several that have been on these podcasts, webinars, whatever they are that we're calling them, that have sent in checks or made donations to continue to help us. So thank you so much for those of you that are financially in a place to do that. We appreciate that so much. Join us tomorrow for podcast number 15, I think it is. Anyway, thank you, John. We've been honored to have you on here. God bless you.
God bless everybody out there, and God bless America. Thank you.
When fear flashes its teeth like a lion, when evil roars and walls begin to shake, there's a strength that's not my own. There's a fire in my bones. He is with me and his hand is ever on me. Follow on me. We're marching out into the night. Follow on me. We're standing up against a giant. Follow on me. We might be walking in the fire, but if it's where we're meant to be, then on